Live to our anchor, Eleni Giokos, who's standing by for us in the mother city. Eleni, looking at this year's lineup, does it actually look any different to previous years, or are you having that distinct feeling of deja vu resulting from the many talk shops that you've attended over the years?
I mean, there's so many more people that have come to this year's World Economic Forum on Africa, over 1,000 participants. And, everyone talks about this talk shop, but the truth is that a lot of discussions happen behind closed doors, and perhaps those are the seeds that are then sown for deals to come. Joining me now is Minister in the Presidency, Trevor Manuel. Thank you very much, Minister, for your time. Great to have you on eNCA. Delivering on Africa's promises. Do you think that South Africa is able to deliver on its promises?
Well, I find myself in a rather interesting position. A lot of work has been done on African infrastructure. And today has been a day of looking at those plans. A lot of them are still fresh. Now we have to explore how and who will implement. So the implementation challenge is fundamentally important because a lot of the technical work has been done. Do we have the people? Will we be able to afford this big infrastructure drive? And I think it places the continent in a very interesting position because across the continent there's a lot more economic growth, there's a lot more wealth, but it needs the infrastructure to be able to take it to the next level. And in an interesting way, South Africa is similar. We've done the hard work on the National Development Plan. Now we must find the implementation mechanisms, and I think in many ways we mirror the African challenge, and that's what makes this particular West Africa so important and such an important learning opportunity for me.
You mentioned funding, and it's all about how it's going to be funded. Where is this money going to come from? Are you banking on the private sector coming in and helping with the infrastructure growth story?
There has to be a lot of private sector funding. I think that most countries are still developing their tax systems. Because of long years of poverty, there's a limitation on what countries can borrow right now. And so a lot of the African funding would have to come from public-private partnerships. At the same time, it's important to recognize that when one looks at the increasing numbers of oil and gas discoveries, for instance, if countries contract well, then they should have revenues in the short term to fund some of this. So it shouldn't be indebtedness for a very long period. It's just an accelerated access to be able to ensure that the infrastructure development can take off. And this is where I think that as South Africans, we should really learn from the rest of the continent because, 10 years ago, South Africa was in a league of its own. Now one meets and visits other African countries and you see the rate of change, and I think that we should be watching our backs because other countries are catching up very, very quickly in technology, in quality of life, in earnings. So the continent is changing, and I think that dynamic is very useful and important for us.
Are you worried that South Africa is losing its limelight right now? And I've spoken to many analysts, they say we have to work a whole lot harder. How much harder in your mind do we need to work?
I think we must demonstrate that we are capable. There is the wherewithal. I think that in some respects we've become a bit lazy. We've lost the edge, be this in entrepreneurship or in research and development. I think for a lot of younger people in South Africa now, money's come fairly easily. And I'm talking about a small group because there's a large swathe of people who are unemployed and left behind. We must ensure that there's more equity, but I think that people who benefit must actually make big investments in driving changes forward as well.
I keep looking at this unemployment figure. It's basically stuck at 25%. It feels as if we are failing when it comes to unemployment. Do you have the same sentiment?
I'm exceedingly worried about it. The release by Stats SA earlier this week, which is now available in a lot of detail. One of the issues in the release, for instance, is that you can see the numbers now. You can see that people with tertiary education mainly get employed. The unemployment figure for people with tertiary education is like 7%. People with less than grade 12, it's above 40%. And that's where we're stuck. And so We look at employment, but it's actually understanding what needs to be done in the education system to ensure that we have young people with a different skill set, because investment will come more easily if people have better skills when they enter the labour market as well.
When you attend the bilateral debates that I know that you're also going to one later on this evening, give us an indication of what kind of conversation is being had. Do you find that you are competing against investment from certain countries, and you might be losing it to other African countries? Are you finding that's increasing?
Look, South Africa's mineral resources attracted a lot of investment. It was gold and platinum. But gold is now available in all kinds of countries. People who watch eNCA would know that there was an issue at a gold mine that collapsed in the Darfur region of the Sudan in the past week. The Sudan gold producer had never featured. Suddenly our gold reserves are very deep, very expensive to mine, and other countries have it. And platinum, whereas we have a very high percentage of the world's reserves, the demand for platinum has fallen, and so we're seeing our own platinum sector under severe stress with jobs and low profitability. And other countries are finding minerals that we don't have, and one looks at the rate of growth of oil and gas across the continent. It's really phenomenal. One of the new forms of fossil fuel is actually a methane ice, and it's been tracked to countries that already are pumping oil and gas across the continent, and we left out. So that wealth is going to be very important for continental growth. And I think part of what we as South Africans need to learn is a bit of humility in the way in which we engage with our neighbours, because we're going to need them a lot more than they're going to need us in the future.
Minister, always a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you very much for your time. Much appreciated. And of course, that was Minister in the Presidency, Trevor Manuel, joining us here in Cape Town at the World Economic Forum on Africa. Jan, it's back to you.
News that moves. eNCA.com.